people will have to pay attention because the train wreck is about to happen. Don't buy what the government tells you to buy what the government's buying, right? And the government's buying it, right? The government has got a high priority on this and companies are buying it, right? There is no electrification without copper.
Gold went down this year when there was a war, copper went up. What can we deduce from that? The best performing asset of the year may not be what you think. We're going to go over the metals complex and reveal what may continue to be one of the most outperforming assets and what could happen to this asset later this year. Welcome back to the show. Ian Harris, President and CEO of Copper Giant. Welcome back.
Always a pleasure to be here and have these conversations. You make me do my homework.
Well, I don't think I need to make you do anything. You're always well prepared, even without me. Ian, welcome back to the show. Last time we spoke, copper was at all-time highs. It still is. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. Copper has been trading near a very close correlation with the stock market, and we can go over that and what that signals. Right now, we're speaking on FOMC day, so it's interesting how the Fed may or may not move markets. I want to look ahead now at the bigger picture. What do you think the price of copper is signaling when it comes to growth in the economy right now?
So it's, Dr. Copper is breaking out. It's coming into a brand new identity because despite everything that's going on the planet that would traditionally wreak havoc, it seems to, it budges and it just keeps on showing lots and lots and lots of strength. And also that the correlation with the stock market seems like, to me, it sounds like it's a little bit of a rotation going on. Like there's a lot of conversations of people very bullish on copper, and it's just a question of, okay, when do I really start moving into it? So I think that copper is getting out of its pure Dr. Copper role. I think it's still very important. But it's kind of undeniable, right? Before we talked about copper's COVID toilet paper moment, right? And well, look at the stockpiles and look at this and turn around and a little bit later and look at Shanghai stockpiles, right? And it's because they wanted those stockpiles because they were really worried about supply. You see historical prices in copper and how it's Chile, the world's biggest producer of copper's response, it's down 15%, right? Like, so the market, the industry cannot respond even at these higher prices, meaning it can only keep going up until it creates that response. There's just not enough copper.
Well, there's we're going to talk about Colombia, where you're based, but right now I'm getting this news. Chile's deadly storm adds growing pressure to copper prices. Just today, you'll recall that the copper price spiked up intraday, couple hours ago, really, from $6.26 to $6.34. Deadly storms in Chile have disrupted copper mining, the world's top producer, in the past weeks, adding pressure to a market already struggling to meet surging demand from AI, electrification, and energy transition. That's the latest news. Maybe much of this recent move up was supply side driven, nothing to do with the fundamentals of the economy. What do you think?
I do too, because then there's the other thing going on and inventory not showing up in Shanghai. So you're also having a big hit on inventories. At the same time, people are going, wait a second, this could get ugly fast. El Nino or La Nina, I think it's El Nino, and it's not supposed to be a quick one, right? It's supposed to be, this could be ongoing. Chile is the world's largest producer. You still have the impact of what happens when you run out of sulfuric acid. Plus, so a lot of things are adding up that people are very concerned that the supply side, which has always been modeled to perfection, right? It assumes nothing goes bad, right? And things get built. And obviously the reality is that it's not that way. So it doesn't take much of a disruption to affect copper, even if you look at worldwide inventories at historical highs was like 15 days. So it does not take a lot for there to be the disruption. And then the other big one is the majority, at least in the United States, people are accustomed to just-in-time delivery, right? So when they don't get those deliveries, that means delay. And so those things are going to start cascading. And I think there's a little bit of concern on the end user side.
Is copper becoming less of a cyclical metal and more of an infrastructure mineral?
Well, it will still be cyclical, right? It will just be cyclical because of industrial uses, right? But it's pretty simple. If it takes you 6 months to make a wire plant, but it takes you 20 years to make a mine, it takes a while before that copper price incentivizes more supply. So those things are out of sync, and therefore it will be cyclical. But I do think this will be it's traditionally a very long cycle, right? And I think this one, it will be very interesting because of the required demand and just for electrification, and just forget the additional layers on top of everything. There was an anticipation of a day of reckoning anyways, because pure brownfields expansions, no exploration for decades, and it just takes you a long time. So even it's not just that in copper we're going to need a lot and we don't have enough mines. It's if you calculate everything that's required, there's not even the deposits, right? The deposits don't, and so it will take a long time to fill that pipeline to any reasonable level. And because it's so fundamental in electrification, and now although it is important, the energy transition, that can just take a longer, right? But I don't think the AI race and data centers plus electrification, anybody wants to wait any longer, right?
The world has seen what happens when you choke off oil in the Middle East. I don't think the world's waking up to the fact that the copper complex is one of the most important minerals in the world for not just the AI build out, but I don't think there's effectively any electrical grid on the planet that doesn't use copper. If someone were to weaponize copper to the same extent that the Iranians have weaponized the Strait of Hormuz, what would that look like? How would that be done?
Well, it would be so about 60% of the world's smelting comes from one country. So the smelting of oil is China, right? But the production is mostly, I think if you combine Chile and Peru together, it's another 40. So if they decided to make a cartel, you'd be in big trouble. I don't think it would be the same weaponization because it is the production changes are much longer in copper, but it is showing its significance, right? It's definitely when oil goes up, your gasoline price goes up. So you feel it a lot faster. It will take longer in copper, but it is extremely essential. And it's just not that every time that you need electricity, it may use copper. If it's on low voltage, it goes through copper. So any electron that gets to any final end use definitely travels over copper, right? There is no electrification without copper. And that includes telecommunications or electricity or any of these other things. That's why it's so important. And I think the really big one is when one company or one country gets faster at doing something that's essential to the future, that's when it becomes really serious. And that it might become, I don't think weaponized, but there's obviously a lot of concern over the strategic supply of copper. And I think a lot of the other strategic metals are kind of like the skirmishes. It's by far probably the most critical metal out of the metal mix. And it's not just copper that's going to be replacing oil. And there's a lot of out there, copper is the new oil, but it's really strategic also the new oil, right? If we're going to a world that's not just decarbonized, but it's digitalized, right? That's the new economy that's going to run on copper.
What if, I'm not saying this will happen, but what if there's a war with China and they decide to stop exporting refined copper? How will the rest of the world adapt?
So, first of all, I think that's a very unlikely scenario because it's not like China has started a lot of wars with anyone, but there is the concept of the assassin's mace, right? So, which is the asymmetric ability and the control that China has over this. But I don't think it did it control them. I think it did it because it needs them. I mean, it was pretty simple. They said in years, we're going to need a lot of copper. So let's have a lot of copper. And now it's getting to the point where there's not enough copper, so we just want to make sure it's for us. But I do think there will be some struggles over resources, right? And maybe it is a little naive of me not to say, well, we fought wars over oil, so strategic metals definitely might be the next a serious tension point. But it will probably be more over smelting capacity. If you make the decision, you can just build the smelting capacity, but it's the actual resources in the ground which are, I think, going to be more coveted. Some of them will fall off the plate, right? There's a lot of critical or rare earths, et cetera, that just aren't that rare. The problem is we're not producing them, we're not processing. But there is many of them where the resource side, the actual deposit side, is the problem, and that's really one of the areas where copper is very different than the others. It's not just a question of building more capacity in smelting, for example, where in rare earths it kind of is, or lithium it is. You're building battery plants quicker than you can process lithium, but in copper, the deposits aren't there, right? You need more deposits, right? And so where those deposits exist, I mean, if we look at the Andes, 12 of the 20 largest copper mines in the world lie on that line, right? So it is concentrated in small areas. And then the other problem is, we've found most of them that are easy to get to, right? So they're getting harder and harder to get to and longer to develop. And that might cause more tension.
Walk us through the geology of copper in South America here. I've just pulled up a chart for reference.
Sure.
Chile produces most of the world's copper, unrefined. China then refines it. Colombia, where you operate, is up here. But tell us about the coast and the Andes and why this particular belt is so important for copper here.
Yeah, the majority of big copper, the majority, not all of it, right, comes from what's called a copper porphyry. And copper porphyries are generated in subduction zones. And subduction zones is where you have one plate going under and one plate going up, right? That normally create mountain ranges. And in the case of the Andes, you have multiple separate events, including the Jurassic and the Miocene, for example, that created the environments where these subduction zones would then produce an intrusive that would then produce a porphyry type deposit. So that's why you see so many. And obviously, why were the majority in Chile? Well, it was a desert, so it's kind of easy to see them, right? It was easier to find them, right? But things have been moving northwards, right? And you could even argue have been moving back to Argentina, but those areas are harder to access. It's obviously easier to get to the top of the Andes Mountains in Chile than it is to do it from Argentina, right? So that is also another part of it. But that same mountain range is the range that has created those. It's just been the difference between dry South America and that same zone goes through United States, for example, or Arizona, or the Ring of Fire, which is classic through the BC and Alaska, right? These are the type of areas that create it. You have one plate going on the other. There's an intrusive comes in, it just kind of sits there and it's pumping out these fluids, and you accumulate that copper mineralization around them. And that's why, you just don't find them in the middle of anywhere, right? They're created in a geologically a very unique way.
So for decades, the copper price has been a proxy for Chinese construction. People looked at the copper price as a leading indicator for construction activity out of China, and by proxy extension, economic growth activity out of China. If people were to look at the copper price today and make a deduction as to what that leads, what would that be?
Well, we have to remember why it was a proxy to China, because it was the biggest population going from poverty into the middle class, right? But to go into the middle class, you need electricity, right? You need that in order to build a newer economy. And if you look at the rest of the planet, there's still billions of people that are moving from that. You can look at India, or you can look anywhere. But what's also happening is the new uses of copper. So I would say even today, 90% of all copper is used in electrification. It is to turn, when you hit that light switch, your light bulbs turn on, right? I mean, I know I'm overly simplifying it, but that is the wiring in your house, or the wiring around an electric motor, or anything that's running electricity at a lower voltage. But then you layer on top of it the energy transition, and just look at an electric vehicle. Not only does it have copper motors, all those electrical motors are made out of copper, the windings of those motors. But now you do not need gasoline to power that car. You still need the energy, but the energy now comes in the form of electricity. And that electricity also has to be generated and transmitted and distributed. Right. So for each electric vehicle, it's not just the amount it makes to make it, but it's also to power it. So there's a whole new other layer. And then the other layer is to go from poverty to middle class, you want access to electricity, you want access to water, you need all these basic conditions to create a standard of living that improve for society. But now it's also going into what is the next thing that is the most important economy is the digitalization of the planet. It's the AI, it's the computation, it's the your work, like if you look at our stock market and you say, please add up what is 80% of our stock market today, it's all tech companies, right? Because that is the future economies of the world. And all of that is transmitted over copper, right? So it's another layer. And those are fast growing layers. I remember when I first tweeted about this, is it still called a tweet? But we tweeted about this on the impact of AI. I said the difference between this number and every other number, because that time I said it will projected to be by the end of the year 1%. Was this is a number that every time you look at it, it's only going to go up, right? Because the second Google is faster than Meta, right? Then Meta has to get faster, right? So it's just all of these programs are accelerated, and we're seeing it. I think it's now 4%.
Robert Friedland called gold no longer the safe haven. Copper is a new safe haven. I've talked to several people about this. Their conclusion, he's talking his own book. We know he owns copper projects, but just objectively evaluate that statement. Gold went down this year when there was a war. Copper went up. What can we deduce from that?
Well, I think it's for different reasons, right? It's absolutely different reasons where you're trading in gold because it's a quasi monetary, it's money. Anyways, where copper, what he's saying is that copper price is going up. The world needs a lot of copper. So independent of what's happening in the dollar or anything else, this is a commodity that is so required that it is like a safe haven. I don't know if it's because if you look at the stock market, how well it trades to each other. And so you have the risk off and copper just seems to like shake it off really quickly. It hasn't transitioned completely to that because it does take it hit. It does take its hits, but it also shakes them off really, really, really fast. But I'm seeing it more of a rotation. Talking to a lot of people, they're like, man, this tech stocks are way overpriced. Everything's going crazy. We're waiting for the correction, but the party's still on, but we've got one foot in the other pool. And I think that's what's more happening, that people are using it as a hedge. Right. So you are seeing the hedge trade. We haven't seen it rotating as much to the equities, but you are seeing some rotation into the equities. But I do feel you see a lot of toes in the pool. Right. I mean, I do 3 conversations a day, at least, with different groups. And in the past, it was all mining focused funds. And now it is not. Right now, it is definitely people. We are now looking at commodities and we are a generalist fund or we're an emerging markets fund or we're doing this, and they're all looking for and starting to pay attention to copper.
The copper price here on this chart is the bar chart and the gold price is the blue line. Now you'll see that the two have followed each other quite closely until May, when, like I said earlier, copper continued to trade sideways and up, ultimately ending the year up. I'll give you the exact number, 12%. Gold's down 5.5%. The divergence started around early May. Have the sentiments between investors of copper and gold projects shifted around that time as well? Or have we seen an environment where the entire mining complex is looking at weaker sentiment because precious metals have pulled away capital from the entire mining sector? Which is it?
Well, I think that this is copper, right? So we're looking at copper price. And yes, you definitely see that basically when we're in a normal market, things are just trading and then there's regular economic cycles. But it's obviously that copper is breaking out of its Dr. Copper role, and you're seeing it right there, right? But yes, the copper equities are not performing as well as copper is, despite having a significant hedge to it, right? Because if it costs you $3 to produce and copper price goes up $1, your profitability doesn't go up, 20%. It goes up, it doubles, right? So traditionally on the books, you're going to perform way better than the commodity price. But it is some obviousness that there is some weight that has happened because gold price has pulled off a little bit. but I think you're also seeing the start of a rotation, right? So I think gold is trading like it's traditionally is trades, and the difference is that copper has changed the way it's being traded.
Okay.
That's the divergent. I don't think it's because gold did something special. It's because copper is being it's breaking out of its Dr. Copper shell.
But to Friedland's point, is copper the new safe haven? Is that the thing we look at or go to when there's volatility in the world, because it's anchored on not just growth out of construction, but the electrification of the world, the AI build out of every single country, advanced economy in the world? And these aren't trends that go away just because the Strait of Hormuz is closed by Iran.
Well, I think if we think about a new world and you think about stable coins or whatever, right?
Sure.
I do think that copper will be a component within that stability, right? I don't think it will be the commodity, but it definitely is performing and looking like it should be a part of that portfolio, without a doubt.
Well, if one were to argue that the AI tech sector is in a bubble, which I hear almost every single day of my life, couldn't one also make the argument that copper is overvalued or overbought because it's following this bubble? What's your response?
My response is you're differentiating an equities market with actually what happens on the ground. And so you cannot deny the amount of money these tech companies have, right? So their priority, I feel, while their stock price is important today, their real goal here is existential. And they say, if we are not ahead of this and stay on top of this, we just won't survive, right? If we do not have the best AI or the best computation, the best whatever, the best data centers, the best of the best, or be building those, right, we'll die. And they have the money to deploy. It's that simple. So I think they're still going to execute. So if the AI bubble busts tomorrow in the equity markets, I don't think it changes the fundamentals on the ground, because it doesn't change what China does. It doesn't change that the United States wants to stay ahead, right? It doesn't change all of those things, right? It just changes what happened on the equity side, that it got over, when the ratios are ridiculous compared to revenues, right? That's what corrects the equities market. But it doesn't change the underlying fundamental that's driving it, which is it's a race, without a doubt. If you look back, and I think the best proxy is the internet race, except for I think the AI one is more real than the internet. But you look back at the .com, it's who raised the most money, who came up with the most effective business, and they survived and became Amazon and Google and whoever else, right? They survived that. And I think that lesson, every single one of the tech companies knows now, right? They saw what happened in the internet. And so even if it was a bubble, it doesn't matter. You still needed to accumulate, even if it was on a bad business model of real estate, like the land grab of having the most number of users. They were right. At the end of the day, they were right. The ones that survived were the ones that were the furthest ahead, right? When the bubble popped. But it didn't change that we have Amazon and Google and Yahoo and all these other gigantic companies that are making up 80% of the stock market today, right? And so I think that's that I don't think it would change the fundamentals.
Yeah, your company stock, CGNT, by the way, on the TSXV is a symbol for copper giant. Your company stock has roughly followed the price of copper this year, but what major catalysts outside of the macro conditions and the copper price that we talked about are you watching for?
Okay, well, this is for me personally, right? So the biggest one we've been watching for a long time is when will market wake up, right? And so I have this conversation a lot, like, okay, copper's up 14% in a year, but I don't see the equities going up. And that's because, NVIDIA went up 120%, right? So you have to be the best option, right? But you're starting to see the rotation. And that's really happening. It definitely happened last year. You really started to take it off. The COPJ has been consolidating sideways, but it hasn't gone really down, right? Since Iran broke out. So that's one thing, because this is a business about timing, right? You have to be ahead right? Before market reacts, because then all the new players show up afterwards. And you don't want to be trying to build the mine right when the bubble pops. You want to make sure you're one of the first ones to build it. But the other big one specifically for us is Colombia, right? Colombia just had an election and we're going to have a new president in 8 days. No, 9 days. So very, very, very soon, right? And depending when the interview comes out. And Colombia has had an overhang because of the market sentiment towards the existing government. And that's going to change, I think, dramatically. This is seeing the statements that are being made on the ground. And so it's really when does market pick up on that? Because as a jurisdiction, Colombia is very well endowed. It's very close to the United States and very close to the United States. It's the number one ally of the United States. So as we are deglobalizing the world and people are kind of putting circles over their area of influence, I think this will have a dramatic change on Colombia. So we made some strategic decisions and they're playing out. One of the big one is be ready to do a PEA. Basically, as soon as you have a new president, it keeps you in that political window of time where something can get constructed when you have a lot of tailwinds. Those are the major things I'm looking at.
But Ian, am I missing something? Didn't the Colombia presidential election already win?
Yes.
Get a result? The right-wing president won. Yeah.
Yeah, but as you say, market responds little by little, and it requires momentum. So I think most people are watching Colombia, but look at Malay and Argentina. There was a lot of excitement, but it didn't really spark. It took time to build that momentum or especially in the mining side, where the Argentinian projects just started going up and up and up. It's not a hockey stick, and normally it happens when let's watch. Ooh, who did he make minister? What did that person say? What did what did happen? And people start seeing all these signals, and it just builds the momentum into the market.
Okay, so the market needs to be convinced that this right-wing president, who you told me before, is going to be probably more pro-mining than the left. He needs to keep his promises, is essentially what this comes down to.
I'm more of a cynic, David. It's when do I think that David is actually going to buy the stock that's in Colombia? Then that's the right time, because I've already believe A, B, and C. So I believe everything is perfect. It's when FOMO kicks in, right? Where it goes, okay, now is the time to move. I think that there's plenty of people watching. The amount of inbound conversations I've had is everybody is watching. They're just waiting to see who blinks first and who moves first. So it's when follow the money, when the money starts moving, I think all the other pieces are in place, right? When does the dam break, right? But yes, a part of it is seeing the action and actual signals on the ground only help push, that dam starts breaking, right? And I think it's going to happen because his platform was on it. He's already doing the things that, he's in the United States. Colombia's open again. We're going to reopen how we're going to coordinate together with the U.S. on security. Things are being signed. The guy is definitely moving in the right direction, and his appointments are also very impressive of the type of people and the statements that they're already making. It just has to get to the masses in the market.
Other company catalysts that investors can watch for? Any new drilling programs on the way?
Well, we put out an absolutely fantastic call a couple of days ago, but yeah, we're monthly putting out our drilling. We got 3 drills running. We're looking at mobilizing or working on organizing the mobilization of a 4th drill. We have a PEA that will be coming out, which will be the first preliminary economic assessment on the project by the end of the year. And that's a big deal for us, not just as a catalyst, but also as a company, because that's now you're truly going into project development. And you're not just saying how many pounds you have, but how much does it cost to get them out of the ground, and what it would be worth when you do it, right? What is the NPV of your project, which for market it's NAV. So instead of giving kind of a nebulous thought of how much a deposit is worth, it's actually saying, no, more or less, it should be worth about this much. And it really gives market a target of where this company's valuation could go compared to where it is today, while you also have the big de-risking moment. The biggest overhang on the company has been perception of Colombia. So we're very excited of where we've gone. We had a great run between November until the Iran war broke out. And I think that will just be restarted, that reevaluation that we were going through from now until the end of the year. I think that the inbounds that we're seeing, normally it was all outbound in the past, the inbound is sending the signal that a lot of people are paying attention to copper and to Colombia and this deposit, because something I'd like to reiterate is there are very few billion-ton near-surface copper deposits that aren't already in a major, right? And I had a conversation. It's funny how market gets super excited about great drill hole results when they're 1,000 meters under the ground, right? Like there is a massive difference between something that's deep and something that's near surface, and market will start recognizing it. And that's one of the reasons we're doing a PEA, so that you could actually see why. I can't wait to be able to compare our PEA to the PEA of Filo de Sol, for example, which was everybody loved, because it's really deep underground, right? So it takes really a long time. Or you look at the project in Poland that takes 7 years just to do the shaft. Like it will start really demonstrating effectively the quality of project that this is.
Let's recap the current situation for the copper market. We have a situation where copper is trading near all-time highs, like we talked about. The AI build-out, the CapEx build-out for data centers, and the ongoing electrification of the world have continued to put upward pressure on the demand for copper. Supply is not growing as fast as demand is growing, and we've talked about this extensively before, you and I. How does this situation make your job as a CEO different than, let's say, if you were operating in this industry 10 years ago in Colombia? In other words, the CEO of a copper company today, and by the way, the copper commodity itself was deemed or categorized as a critical mineral by the U.S. government for the first time last year. How does this environment differ for you today versus 10 years ago, just from an operations priority perspective?
So the biggest change from 10 years ago to today, and I'm trying to calculate, nope, Corriente sold around 2011 or 2012. So it's even older than 12 years ago. It was the end of the last cycle. So we're back into, the cycle has flipped over and it's back into a bear market. And a lot of CEOs got fired because they paid way too much. You couldn't build those big projects they bought. And the most fundamental change between now and then is, if you're trying to explore and develop a brand new project, every single major mining company said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're just going to do brownfields expansion, right? It's about the same price, maybe a little less expensive or a little bit more expensive, but it's way less risky. So they all went on a brownfields expansion. So if you're running a development company, trying to develop a new project, it was not a fun time. Definitely was not a fun time. Nobody would be interested. You'd have to do it yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody would want to finance you, et cetera. The difference today is, and I would say the difference, it was probably 4 years ago, right, where most people recognized the problem, just nobody was listening, right, because there was more interesting fun on the table between cryptocurrencies and the AI build out, et cetera, et cetera. But eventually, the stuff is going to hit the fan, right, and it's going to, people will have to pay attention because the train wreck is about to happen. Right. So the difference today is, I think the world is waking up. I think it's very much just in the beginning days of actually understanding. You hear Bezos talking about the need of materials. We got a materials problem. People are starting to recognize it and talk about it. Right. And so you're in the early stages of people able to recognize the problem and people caring. And that, I use a Frank Giustra quote, which is, don't buy what the government tells you to buy what the government's buying, right? And the government's buying it, right? The government has got a high priority on this, and companies are buying it. Iron companies are trying to become copper companies or shift a bigger piece into their copper. There's a lot of companies investing into copper, buying copper projects. We had Arizona Sonora sell at the beginning of the year. Like, they're already acquiring projects, right? So the sophisticated people who get it, right, the very a longer term vision are already doing it. So, and the other piece of information I always say is, this is one that you haven't missed the boat on, right? This is a cycle that will play out over, I think, a decade. It will take a decade to unsolve it, right? Where the supply demand, kind of the divergence starts happening, because it takes so long to incentivize new production, and the only way to make it faster is an increased price.
This piece of news came out today from the Wall Street Journal. Glencore's traders gain as the Iran conflict upends commodities markets. Glencore is one of the world's largest diversified natural resources companies. So going down to this first paragraph and last paragraph here. Glencore traders said they expect to book a strong first half performance after conflict in the Middle East triggered chaos across energy markets and metal prices remain elevated. Glencore said copper production for the first 6 months of the year rose 15% to 397,000 metric tons. The company has made copper central to its strategy and is investing heavily to become one of the world's largest miners of the metal. When Glencore is making this shift, what does that signal to you?
No, the same thing I just said, right? That the smart money is going in first, right? They're figuring out this is going to happen. How are we going to benefit from it? And so you have the biggest trader in the world saying we're shifting to copper. Tells you that the rest will follow, right? So I am very excited. I mean, I remember our conversations. We've been talking for a long time now, and that's kind of coming to fruition. The things that we've discussed it's actually happening in front of us. And I still think, right, like in the early days, all the smelter, the treatment charges reduced, inventories went up, right? But all of a sudden, those inventories are disappearing. And now we're looking at those first deficits are hitting, right? I bet you that we saw a massive increase in the refined copper, right, in the beginning of the year. But what we didn't see is the production of copper, like coming out of the mine. Everybody was trying to build up an inventory. And so it keeps going downhill until you go, we don't have enough deposits, right? So it's the beginning of the chain, comes from the deposits. There's not enough deposits. So we're obviously feeling very excited, right, to have one of the few coveted projects on the planet, right? At the same time where Colombia is opening up its putting out the rah-rah to say this is a place you should invest, and have a president who will help get it, right?
So what's next for Copper Giant for this quarter? I'm sure I'll speak with you before the end of the year, but just this quarter in particular, the election in Colombia is done. We've anticipated, you and I talked offline about this a couple weeks ago, you anticipated the right to win. They did. And the copper price is still at an all-time high. Any changes in the corporate strategy from this year to the next that we can anticipate? And how does this fit in broadly with your underlying vision from switching all the way back from your Libero copper and gold days to now Copper Giant?
So I think I might have said it to you before. My biggest concern is our valuation, because with now a new president, it will be pedal to the metal. You have a true political window open in time, and this is the time to get it done. Right? I look back at my Ecuador days where Mirador got built and Fruta del Norte got built, and nothing has been built since. Right? These windows open up, and it's a real window. And remember, there was only about 6 big copper mines built in the last 10 years. So these windows open, and there is a real window. In Colombia right now, there's the demand, there's the price, there's the political window, there's the equity. All things are coming together that can actually make this make this happen. So we don't want to miss that target, right? We want to make sure we're going to take advantage of the bonanza, I think, that is going to be coming, and we're well equipped for it, right? I mean, that's another is. We have a team that has been involved in some of the biggest copper projects in the world, been involved in some of the most important mining projects in Colombia, right? Have seen this process and know what's coming at us, right? So it's not something that we're going to be discovering along the way. We're very proactive. Mark Gibson, for example, one of the directors, was literally just here. He left yesterday, and was down on the site visit with SLR. That we're very involved and very proactive. So we're also well equipped for sailing these types of seas. So we're pretty excited.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time, Ian. Thank you for the update, and thank you for getting us up to speed on the current events with copper. Tell us where we can learn more about your company.
So a couple ways, and I think you made fun of me for last time for doing this, but I actually, and I'm still not overwhelmed. If anybody has any questions, send me a WhatsApp. Okay, so I do, well, I do live in Colombia. I'm right now calling from Medellin. I do live here. So WhatsApp is the way, but it's +1, but it's 303-956-2944. Otherwise, coppergiant.com for our website. We are very proactive on X, which I think is CU Giant, CU _giant, to follow us. Or, we continually to try and do these interviews.
Ian, by the way, is one of the few CEOs, in fact, the only CEO I remember talking to in my career that has offered his phone number to you, the audience. So don't be shy.
I did say WhatsApp because if I normally get an unknown phone call, I'm not going to be answering unknown phone calls.
WhatsApp for sure.
Unknown phone calls. But I do try and get back to WhatsApp. Maybe not immediately, but I'm pretty good at getting back to everybody.
Yeah. All right, we'll put the links down below. You have WhatsApp, you have Ian's number there, and you also have the company website. So once again, the ticker is CGNT. Well, please do your due diligence, follow the company, and read the disclaimers and the disclosures and company filings. Welcome back to the show, Ian. It was good to see you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Take care for now.